Captain Jiwan stood before the large screen in his ship's control room. The star map glowed with thousands of colored dots, each one representing a known world or system. But at one edge of the map, everything stopped. A huge empty space stretched across the display, marked only with red warning text, "Human territory, do not enter." Jiwan had been a ship captain for 20 years. He had visited many worlds and met dozens of alien races, but he had never been to human space. No one had. At least no one who came back to talk about it. "Captain," called Hyunwoo from his seat at the navigation controls, "the gravity readings are getting stronger. Something big is happening near the boundary zone." Jiwan walked over to look at the data. Strange energy patterns were showing up on their sensors. Whatever was causing them came from the direction of human space. "How long since anyone tried to cross into their territory?" asked Taejin, the ship's science officer. He was older than the others and had served on many different ships. 300 years, Jiwan replied. "The last group to try was a Thrakari battle fleet. 50 ships, all heavily armed. They sent one message after crossing the boundary, then nothing." Hyunwoo pulled up historical records on his screen. 17 different groups have tried to enter human space over the centuries. Military fleets, science expeditions, even trade missions. None ever returned. The bridge fell quiet. Everyone knew the stories. Some said humans were savage killers who destroyed anyone who entered their space. Others believed they had weapons so powerful that entire fleets could be wiped out instantly. A few thought maybe humans had all died out, leaving behind some automated defense system. "Sir," said Sunho from the communication station, "I'm picking up something strange." "What kind of strange?" Jiwan asked. "A signal. It's very faint, but it's coming from deep inside human territory." Sunho worked at his controls, trying to make the signal clearer. It's a mathematical sequence, repeating over and over. Taejin moved to help Sunho decode the message. After several minutes, he looked up with a worried expression. "These are coordinates, and there's a timestamp from 50 years ago." 50 years? Jiwan frowned. What ship was in that area 50 years ago? Hyunwoo checked the historical database. His face went pale. The Void Hunter. It was a Thrakari dreadnought, the most powerful warship ever built. They crossed into human space exactly 50 years ago. "If they're still transmitting, maybe they're still alive," suggested Minji, the ship's engineer. Sunho continued working on the signal. Finally, he managed to decode a longer message. When he read it aloud, everyone on the bridge felt a chill. Day 847 in human space.
"We are still alive."
"The humans have not killed us. They have not captured us. We wish they had." The words hung in the air like a curse. What could be worse than death or capture? What had the humans done to the crew of the Void Hunter that made them wish for death? "Captain," said Minho, the weapons officer, "the council sent us to investigate these gravity readings. But if we get too close to human space, I know the risks," Jiwan said, but he also knew their duty. The strange gravitational waves were getting stronger each day. Soon they might start affecting nearby colonies. They needed answers. "Take us closer to the boundary," he ordered, "but keep us well outside human territory." As their ship, the Stellar Wind, moved toward the edge of known space, the crew watched their sensors carefully. The boundary itself was clearly marked, not by signs or barriers, but by the complete absence of anything. No ships, no signals, no debris. Just empty space. It's like a perfect sphere, Hyunwoo observed. Whatever keeps ships out, it works in 3 dimensions. They spent hours studying the boundary zone. The gravitational readings were definitely coming from the other side, but their sensors couldn't penetrate into human space. Every scan attempt simply returned empty data. Then Taejin made a discovery that changed everything. "Captain, look at this. The energy patterns we're seeing, they're not natural gravitational waves." "What do you mean?" Jiwan asked. "Someone is creating them on purpose. The patterns are too regular, too organized. This isn't some cosmic accident. Someone inside human space is doing this deliberately." The implications were frightening. If humans were causing the gravitational disturbances, it meant they had technology far beyond anything in the galactic databases. The official record said humans had only achieved spaceflight 4 centuries ago. They were supposed to be one of the youngest races in the galaxy. "Sir," Sunho called out, "I'm detecting more signals from inside human territory. Dozens of them. All very faint, all using different alien communication methods." "Different aliens?" Jiwan moved to the communication station. "You mean the missing expeditions?" "I think so. I can identify Thrakari patterns, Velkari codes, even some Kepler-born signals. They're all still broadcasting, but the signals are so weak it's like they're being filtered through something. As the crew processed this information, Engineer Minji noticed something troubling on her displays. Captain, the gravitational waves are getting stronger. Much stronger. If this continues, the nearby Zelen colonies could be in serious danger. Jiwan stared at the boundary of human space. Somewhere beyond that invisible wall, the crews of 17 expeditions were still alive after decades or even centuries. They were sending signals, but their messages suggested something worse than death awaited anyone who crossed into human territory. Yet the gravitational waves threatened innocent colonies. As a captain in the Galactic Defense Fleet, his duty was clear. He had to find the source of the disturbance and stop it before it caused widespread damage. "All hands prepare for boundary crossing," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going into human space." The bridge crew exchanged worried looks, but no one protested. They all knew what their duty required. As the stellar wind approached the invisible boundary, every sensor on the ship began registering impossible readings. Space itself seemed to bend and twist at the edge of human territory. Then as they crossed the line, everything changed. Their faster-than-light engines shut down completely. Long-range communications went dead. Even their quantum communication beacons, technology that was supposed to be impossible to block, fell silent. They were cut off from the rest of the galaxy, alone in the mysterious space that had swallowed 17 expeditions before them. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, something was watching. The silence was complete. For the first time in his career as a spaceship captain, Jiwan could not contact anyone outside his own vessel. The stellar wind drifted through human space like a leaf in an ocean, cut off from everything familiar. "Status report," Jiwan called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "All FTL systems offline," reported Minji from engineering. "The engines aren't broken, they just won't start. It's like something is blocking them from working." Sunho looked up from his communications panel with worry in his eyes. "No contact with command, no signals from the colonies, nothing. We're completely alone out here." Hyunwoo studied his navigation displays. "Captain, the strange thing is that everything else works fine. Life support, regular engines, sensors, they all work normally. It's just the advanced systems that have shut down." "Like someone wants us to stay but not leave," Taejin said quietly. Before Jiwan could respond, Minho called out from the weapons station. "Captain, ships approaching. Many of them." Everyone rushed to look at the main display. Dozens of contacts were appearing on their sensors, surrounding the stellar wind in perfect formation. But these weren't like any ships in the galactic databases. The human vessels were sleek and dark, their hulls seeming to bend light around them. They moved without any visible engines or energy signatures. Most disturbing of all, they appeared and disappeared on the sensors like ghosts, sometimes there and sometimes not. "Are they trying to communicate?" Jiwan asked. "Nothing," Sunho replied. "No signals of any kind. They're just watching us." The human ships maintained their positions around the stellar wind with impossible precision. When Hyunwoo tried a small course change to test their reactions, every human vessel moved at the exact same time, maintaining their formation perfectly. "How are they doing that?" Minji wondered. "There's no communication between their ships that I can detect." "Maybe they don't need to communicate," Taejin suggested. "Maybe they're all controlled by the same intelligence." Days passed in this strange standoff. The human ships never moved closer, never moved away. They simply watched and waited. The alien crew of the stellar wind tried everything they could think of to make contact. But the humans gave no response. Minho attempted to target the human ships with the stellar wind's weapons, just to see what would happen. The targeting system couldn't lock onto them. It was as if the ships existed in a different layer of reality, close enough to see but impossible to touch. "This is driving me crazy," Minho said after his third failed attempt. "They're right there, but our systems can't recognize them as real objects." "Maybe they're not entirely real," Taejin said. "At least not in the same way we are." On the fourth day, something changed. Hyunwoo was the first to notice it during his regular sensor sweep. "Captain, the human ships have moved closer. Much closer." Jiwan looked at the display and felt his blood turn cold. The human vessels were now orbiting the stellar wind in complex patterns. Sometimes they seemed to pass right through parts of his ship without causing any damage. "That's impossible," Minji said, checking her engineering readings. Nothing can pass through solid matter like that. But the sensors didn't lie. The human ships were moving in three-dimensional patterns around and through the stellar wind, like they existed in multiple layers of space at the same time. They're studying us, Tajin realized. Just like we study interesting specimens in a laboratory, the thought made everyone uncomfortable. They were used to being the ones doing the studying, not being studied themselves. That night, as the crew tried to sleep despite their fears, Engineer Minji noticed something that made her heart race. The human ships were much closer now, close enough that she could see details of their construction through the viewports. The ships were not just advanced, they were beyond anything she had ever imagined. Their hulls seemed to be made of some material that flowed like liquid but held shapes like solid metal. Energy patterns moved through the hull material like blood through veins. "Captain," she called over the internal communications, "you need to see this." Jiwan arrived at the engineering section to find Minji staring out a viewport at a human ship that was floating just meters away. The vessel was easily 3 times the size of the stellar wind, but it made no sound and produced no heat signature. "Look at the hull patterns," Minji said, pointing. "Those energy flows, they're not powering the ship. They are the ship. It's like the entire vessel is one giant computer." As they watched, the patterns in the human ship's hull changed, becoming more complex. New designs appeared and disappeared in the flowing material. "It's learning," Jiwan realized, "watching us and learning about our ship." This thought was confirmed when Sunho made a horrifying discovery the next morning. While checking the communications equipment, he detected something that shouldn't have been possible. "Captain, I'm receiving our own transmissions back from the human ships." "What do you mean?" Jiwan asked. "Our internal communications, conversations we had yesterday, equipment checks from engineering, even personal logs. The human ships are transmitting them back to us. Perfect copies, but delayed by several hours." The implications hit everyone at once. The humans weren't just watching them. They were recording everything. Every word, every action, every piece of data from their ship systems was being copied and analyzed. "How is that possible?" Minyo demanded. "Our communications are encrypted and shielded." "Not against this," Tajin said, studying the data. "Whatever technology they're using, it can see right through our shields and encryption as if they don't exist." Over the following days, the situation became more disturbing. The human ships began transmitting back not just their communications, but improved versions of them, conversations where their words were clearer, equipment readings that were more accurate than their own instruments could produce. "They're not just copying us," realized Hyunwoo. "They're making us better. Like they're running tests on improved versions of our technology." The most frightening discovery came when Taijin detected quantum patterns in the space around their ship. The patterns contained detailed information about their species, their homeworld, their technology, and even their biological functions. "They know everything about us," he reported to the captain. "Our DNA, our brain patterns, how our technology works, even how we think. It's like they've taken us apart and analyzed every piece." Jiwon stared out at the human ships that surrounded them. They had been in human space for over a week, and every day brought new evidence of technology so advanced it seemed like magic. "Sir," Sunho said quietly, "I've been analyzing those old signals from the missing expeditions. I think I understand now why they're still transmitting after so many years. Tell me, the humans aren't destroying the ships that enter their space. They're preserving them. Every crew, every vessel, every piece of technology, it's all still here somehow. Still functional, still transmitting, but changed." The crew fell silent as this reality sank in. They weren't going to be killed or captured in any normal sense. They were going to become part of something larger, something that would study them for decades or centuries while keeping them alive to provide information. As if responding to their growing understanding, the human ships began to move in new patterns, tighter formations, more complex movements. They were preparing for the next phase of whatever process had claimed 17 expeditions before them. The stellar wind was about to join a collection that had been growing for 300 years. The breakthrough came when Sunho detected something impossible. While monitoring the communication channels, he heard his own voice coming back from the human ships. Not a recording, his actual voice, speaking words he was saying at that exact moment. "Captain," he called out, his voice shaking. "They're transmitting my words back to me as I speak them. Right now in real time." Jiwon rushed to the communication station. Sure enough, Sunho's voice was coming through the speakers, delayed by only a few seconds. But the words were coming from ships that were hundreds of kilometers away. How is that possible? Jiwan asked, and his own voice echoed back from the speakers moments later. They're not just listening to us, Taejin realized, his face pale. They're inside our communication systems. Inside our ship's computers. Maybe inside our heads. The thought sent chills through the entire crew. If the humans could intercept their thoughts and words in real time, then nothing was private. Nothing was secret. Hyunwoo made another disturbing discovery while studying the sensor data. Captain, I've been analyzing the patterns of the human ship's movements. They're not random. Each ship is following a path that matches the flight patterns of different alien species. What do you mean? Jiwan asked. This ship here, Hyunwoo pointed to one of the human vessels, is moving exactly like a Thrakari dreadnought would move. That one over there is using Velkari navigation patterns. They're copying the flying styles of every species that has ever entered human space. The implications were staggering. The humans weren't just collecting ships and crews. They were learning to perfectly imitate every alien culture they encountered. But the real horror came when Taejin made his next discovery. While trying to understand how the human ships could exist in multiple dimensions, he found something in the quantum readings that made him sick with fear. Captain, you need to see this, he said, his hands shaking as he worked the controls. I've found traces of the missing expeditions. They're still here. Here? Where? Jiwan demanded. All around us. The quantum signatures show 17 different types of alien technology. All active, all functioning. But they're not separate anymore. They've been combined somehow. Taejin showed them the readings on the main screen. Complex patterns of energy flowed through the space around their ship, carrying the quantum signatures of dozens of different alien technologies all mixed together. The Void Hunter is still here, Taejin continued. So is the Celestial Wanderer, the Deep Explorer, all of them. But they're not separate ships anymore. They're part of something bigger. Minji studied the engineering readings with growing horror. It's like they've been absorbed into some kind of network. All their technology, all their knowledge, everything they knew, it's all been integrated into whatever the humans have built here. But what about the crews? Jiwan asked. The people on those ships? The answer came from an unexpected source. Sunho's communication equipment suddenly came alive with voices, dozens of them, all speaking at once in different alien languages. Day 2847 in the collection, said one voice in Thrakari. We understand now why we cannot leave. Cycle 156 of integration complete, said another in Velkari. Our knowledge has been processed and stored. The humans do not harm us, came a third voice in a language none of them recognized. They preserve us, forever. The voices continued, a choir of alien crews from different expeditions spanning 3 centuries. They were all still alive, still conscious but changed in ways the Stellar Wind crew couldn't fully understand. They're still themselves, Sunho realized, but they're also part of something larger. Like individual notes in a huge song, the human ships began moving in more complex patterns around the stellar wind. As they did, the alien voices became clearer, more organized. New specimens have arrived, the voices said in unison, now speaking in the common galactic language. Welcome to the collection. You will be preserved. You will be studied. You will contribute to the greater understanding. Understanding of what? Jiwan called out, though he wasn't sure if the voices could hear him. The threat that comes, they replied. The danger that approaches from beyond the galaxy. The humans prepare for what must be faced. Before anyone could ask more questions, the human ships stopped their orbiting patterns and took new positions. They were forming a corridor, pointing toward something deeper in human space. They want us to follow them, Hyunwoo said, reading the navigation displays. To where? Minyo asked, his hand moving instinctively toward the weapons controls. The answer came from the alien voices, now speaking with one unified consciousness. To the archive, where all knowledge is stored, where all specimens are preserved, where the true work is done. As the stellar wind was gently guided along the corridor of human ships, the crew saw something that defied all understanding. Ahead of them, space itself seemed to bend and twist, revealing structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. What is that? Minji whispered, staring at the impossible sight. A research facility, Taejin said, reading the sensor data with amazement. But it's bigger than most planets. And it's not entirely in our dimension. The structure ahead of them was vast beyond comprehension. Parts of it were clearly visible, made of the same flowing material as the human ships, but other parts seemed to fade in and out of existence as if they occupied spaces that human eyes couldn't normally see. How many expeditions did you say had disappeared in human space? Ji-won asked. 17, Hyunwoo replied. I'm reading hundreds of different quantum signatures from that facility, Taejin reported. Maybe thousands. If each signature represents a different ship or crew, the realization hit them all at once. The humans hadn't just been collecting the occasional expedition that wandered into their space. They had been gathering specimens from across the galaxy for much longer than anyone realized. Captain, Sunho said, listening to the increasingly complex choir of alien voices, I don't think those 17 expeditions were the beginning. I think they were just the most recent. As they approached the massive facility, more voices joined the chorus. Species they had never heard of, technologies they couldn't identify, knowledge from civilizations that might have disappeared from the galaxy centuries or millennia ago. The humans weren't just studying current galactic civilization, they were preserving the entire history of intelligent life in the galaxy, keeping every species, every discovery, every piece of knowledge safe from extinction. But safe for what purpose? What threat were they preparing to face? And what would happen to the crew of the Stellar Wind when they became part of this vast collection? The facility grew larger as they approached, its impossible architecture becoming more visible. Docking bays opened in its hull, bays that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Ready to receive their ship, all hands. Prepare for docking, Ji-won announced, though he had no idea what they would find inside the archive. The voices of 1,000 preserved civilizations welcomed them as the Stellar Wind entered the facility that held the accumulated knowledge of the galaxy, and somewhere in the depths of that vast structure, something was using all that knowledge to prepare for a threat that made their most advanced technology seem like primitive tools. The docking bay was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. The walls seemed to flow like water but felt solid to the touch. Patterns of light moved through the surfaces, creating designs that hurt to look at directly because they existed in more dimensions than their eyes could process. As the Stellar Wind settled into position, the bay sealed itself with no visible mechanism. Air filled the space around their ship, but it wasn't pumped in through vents. It simply appeared, as if the facility could create atmosphere from nothing. Life support is stable, Minji reported, though her voice carried confusion. But I have no idea how. The air composition is perfect for our species, but there's no way the humans should know what we need to breathe. Through the viewports, they could see movement in the bay. Shapes approached their ship, but they weren't the primitive bipedal humans from the galactic databases. These beings looked like patterns of organized light, maintaining human-like forms when they needed to interact with solid matter. Captain, Sunho called out, I'm receiving a direct communication request. Audio and visual. Put it through, Ji-won ordered. The main screen lit up with the image of a being that constantly shifted between looking human and looking like living mathematics. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds rather than coming through sound. Welcome to Archive 1, the being said. I am Archive Keeper Donghyun. We apologize for the deception, but understanding requires observation, and observation requires trust. Your species, like all others, would have reacted with fear to our true nature. What are you? Ji-won asked. You're not the humans from our databases. We were once, Donghyun replied. But evolution never stops, especially when guided by necessity. We became what we needed to become to fulfill our purpose. The being that called itself Donghyun led them from their ship through corridors that seemed to stretch in impossible directions. Other crew members from the Stellar Wind followed, their minds struggling to process the architecture around them. The facility exists in 17 different dimensional layers, Donghyun explained as they walked. Each layer is dedicated to studying different aspects of the species we have collected. They passed through chambers where the crew could see other aliens, beings from the missing expeditions. But these weren't prisoners or victims. They moved freely, worked on complex projects, and seemed to possess knowledge far beyond what their original species had achieved. The crew of the Void Hunter, Taejin whispered, pointing to a group of Thrakari who were working with energy patterns that defied physics. They look Enhanced. They have been given the choice to expand their consciousness, Dongyun said, to become part of something larger, while retaining their individual selves. Most choose to join our work. They entered a vast chamber where hundreds of different species worked together on projects that spanned multiple dimensions. Former enemies from different worlds collaborated on technologies that no single civilization could have developed alone. What is all this for? Jiwan asked. Another being approached them. This one introducing herself as Research Director Sojin. Her form resembled a living constellation, points of light connected by streams of energy. To answer that question, you must first understand what we have learned from our observations of the galaxy, Sojin said. Show them, Archive. The chamber around them changed, displaying a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. But this wasn't the galaxy they knew from their star charts. This map showed connections between worlds, energy flows between systems, and patterns that revealed the galaxy as a single living organism. Every species that achieves spaceflight follows predictable patterns, Sojin explained. They expand, they explore, they eventually achieve a certain level of consciousness and technological development. When they reach that level, they become visible. Visible to whom? Hyunwoo asked. The answer came from a presence that filled the entire chamber, a consciousness so vast that speaking with it was like trying to talk to a living planet. Archive Director Minjae's voice resonated from everywhere at once. To the entities that exist between galaxies, the beings that feed on civilizations like ours, they have consumed 17 other galaxies, leaving behind only empty space. They are drawn to consciousness itself, to the unique patterns of organized thought that mark intelligent life. The map changed, showing the space between galaxies. Dark shapes moved there, entities so massive that entire star systems would be insignificant to them. The crew watched in horror as the simulation showed these creatures consuming galaxy after galaxy, leaving nothing but cosmic dust. They're coming here, Minjae continued. We detected the first signs 3,000 years ago. They will arrive within the next century. 3,000 years? Jiwon gasped. But humans have only had spaceflight for 4 centuries. Another necessary deception, Dongyun said. Humans have been spacefaring for much longer than your records show. The first contact events in galactic history were carefully staged performances, designed to make us appear young and primitive while we studied your civilizations. The truth hit the crew like a physical blow. Every human diplomat, every human trader, every human tourist who had visited alien worlds had been gathering intelligence. For millennia, humanity had been building a comprehensive database of every species, every technology, every strength and weakness in the galaxy. But why the deception? Taejin asked. Because fear would have made cooperation impossible, Research Coordinator Jihoon explained, his form visible as a network of interconnected consciousness. If the galaxy knew what was coming, panic would have followed. Wars between species, the collapse of civilization, the waste of precious knowledge that we needed to preserve. The map showed the defensive preparations humanity had made. Hidden throughout the galaxy were structures and technologies that could manipulate reality itself, all powered by the combined knowledge of every species that had been collected. Each expedition that entered our space contributed something essential, Sojin said. The Velkari's ability to process spatial relationships, the Thrakari's advanced neural networks, the Kepler-born's natural adaptability. Every species has unique capabilities that add to our defensive capabilities. And our species? Minji asked. Your people have a natural ability to process quantum harmonics, Minji's vast presence replied. This ability is rare in the galaxy. With your knowledge integrated into our systems, we can complete the final component of the galaxy's defense network. The crew of the Stellar Wind stood in silence, processing the magnitude of what they had learned. The humans weren't the primitive newcomers everyone thought them to be. They were the galaxy's hidden guardians, preparing for a threat that would destroy everything if they failed. The choice your crew faces isn't just about yourselves, Jihoon said. Every day we delay is another day closer to the arrival of the entities. Your species' unique abilities could provide the final piece we need to save not just your worlds but every world in the galaxy. Captain Jiwon looked at his crew. They had entered human space expecting to find answers to some gravitational anomalies. Instead, they had discovered that the fate of galactic civilization rested on their decision. What happens if we refuse? He asked. You returned to your ship with your memories modified, Donghyun said. You remember finding only empty space where your instruments detected anomalies. You live out your lives never knowing how close extinction came. And if we agree, you become part of the archive. Your consciousness is expanded to comprehend realities your species was never meant to understand. You help us defend a galaxy that will never know it needed defending. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The beings around them moved with sudden urgency. What's happening? Ji-won demanded, Min-jae's presence filled with concern. Long-range sensors have detected something at the edge of the galaxy. The entities are closer than our calculations predicted. Much closer. The chamber's displays showed the galaxy's rim where space itself was beginning to unravel. Reality was breaking down as something vast and hungry approached from the darkness between stars. How long do we have? Taejin asked. Months, perhaps less, Min-jae replied. We need your species' abilities now. The defense network cannot be completed without them. The crew of the Stellar Wind faced their choice, knowing that the decision would determine not just their own fate, but the survival of everything they had ever known. Outside the facility, reality continued to deteriorate as ancient entities that fed on consciousness itself drew closer to their next meal. The facility shook as waves of distorted space-time washed over it. On the displays around them, the crew could see the edge of the galaxy being consumed by something that existed beyond the normal laws of physics. The entities feed on organized consciousness, Archive Director Min-jae explained, the vast presence's voice carrying notes of urgency. They consume the patterns of thought that make intelligence possible. When they finish with a galaxy, nothing remains that can think, dream, or create. Ji-won watched the displays with growing horror. Entire star systems were simply ceasing to exist as the entities approached. Not destroyed, erased as if they had never been there at all. How can we fight something like that? He asked. By becoming something they cannot consume, Research Director Sojin replied. The defense network we have built operates on principles of consciousness that exist outside their feeding patterns. But it requires the combined knowledge and abilities of every species in the galaxy. Archive Keeper Donghyun gestured, and the chamber around them changed to show the true extent of human preparation. Hidden throughout the galaxy were massive structures that looked like combinations of technology and living thought. Each one was powered by the preserved consciousness of different alien species. This is what we have built with the knowledge of the collected expeditions, Donghyun said. A network of consciousness-based defenses that can operate in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But there are gaps in our coverage. The displays highlighted areas of the galaxy where the defensive network was incomplete. Dark zones where the entities could break through and begin their consumption of organized thought. Your species' natural quantum harmonic abilities can bridge those gaps, Research Coordinator Ji-hoon explained. But we need willing participants, not forced subjects. The network requires conscious cooperation to function properly. Captain Ji-won looked at his crew. Each face showed the same mixture of fear and determination. They understood what was being asked of them, and what would happen to the galaxy if they refused. What exactly would happen to us? Hyunwoo asked. Your consciousness would be expanded beyond the limits of your physical forms, Sojin said. You would become part of the archive's collective intelligence, while retaining your individual personalities and memories. Think of it as joining a vast conversation that includes every species that has ever existed in this galaxy. To demonstrate, she connected them briefly to the communications of the other preserved crews. The voices they heard were clearly still the original beings, but enhanced with knowledge and capabilities far beyond their original species limits. We are still ourselves, said the voice of the Void Hunter's captain, speaking in perfect galactic common. But we understand so much more now. The universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined when we were limited to our original forms. The work we do here, added an engineer from a Kepler-born expedition, is more important than anything we could have accomplished in our old lives. We are building defenses for civilizations that don't even know they need defending. The facility shook again, more violently this time. Emergency lights began flashing as the archive systems registered the approach of something that defied all measurement. Decision time approaches, Min-jae announced. The entity's advance forces have reached the outer systems. We must activate the defense network within hours or lose our chance entirely. Engineer Min-jae stepped forward. If we join the archive, what happens to our ship? To our families back home? Your ship becomes part of the defensive network, Donghyun explained. Your families continue their lives, never knowing how close they came to extinction. If we succeed, the galaxy continues as it always has. If we fail, nothing will matter anymore. The crew members exchanged glances. Weapons Officer Minho was the first to speak. I've spent my whole career preparing to defend innocent people from threats. This is just a bigger threat than I expected. The research we could do, Taejin added. The knowledge we could gain, it would be worth more than 100 lifetimes of normal study. Navigator Hyunwoo nodded slowly. And if we don't help, there won't be anyone left to navigate anywhere. Communications Officer Sunho looked at the displays showing the approaching entities. I've been listening to the voices of the preserved crews for days now. They don't sound like prisoners. They sound like people who found a purpose bigger than themselves. Engineer Minji was quiet for a long moment, then said, My duty as an engineer is to build things that help people. This is the biggest construction project in the history of the galaxy. All eyes turned to Captain Ji-won. The decision was ultimately his, but he could see that his crew had already made their choice. The same choice that 17 expeditions before them had made when faced with the reality of what was coming. We'll do it, he said simply. The reaction was immediate. The archive systems came alive with new activity as they prepared to integrate the Stellar Wind crew into the defensive network. But before the process could begin, alarms sounded throughout the facility. What's happening now? Ji-won asked, Minji's presence filled with alarm. Long-range sensors detect a breakthrough at the galactic rim. One of the entity's advanced scouts has penetrated our outer defenses. It's heading directly for the core worlds. The displays showed a massive distortion in space-time moving through the galaxy at impossible speed. Wherever it passed, star systems simply stopped existing, not destroyed, not damaged, completely removed from reality as if they had never been. How long until it reaches the populated systems? Taejin asked. 6 hours, Minjae replied. Less if it accelerates. Then we need to integrate our crew now, Ji-won said. Whatever process you use, do it fast. Integration normally takes days, Sojin warned. Rushing it could damage your consciousness patterns permanently. And if we don't rush it, there won't be any consciousness patterns left to damage, Ji-won replied. The archive beings worked frantically to prepare the emergency integration systems. Around them, the facility's vast machinery hummed to life, powered by the combined consciousness of thousands of preserved civilizations. The process will be disorienting, Donghyun warned as the crew was led to integration chambers. You will experience memories and knowledge from every species in the archive. Try not to lose yourselves in the flood of information. As Ji-won lay down in his integration chamber, he felt the archive systems beginning to connect with his mind. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced, like being plugged into the thoughts of an entire galaxy. Knowledge flooded through his consciousness. The history of civilizations that had risen and fallen millions of years before his species had evolved. Technologies that made their most advanced ships look like primitive boats. Art, music, literature, and mathematics from 1,000 different worlds. But through it all, he remained himself. Captain Ji-won of the Stellar Wind, now expanded to include the experiences of every being that had ever joined the archive's mission. Around him, his crew underwent the same transformation. Each became more than they had been while remaining exactly who they were. As the integration completed, they felt their consciousness merge with the archive's defensive network. Through quantum harmonic connections, they could sense every defense station hidden throughout the galaxy. Most importantly, they could feel the gaps in coverage that only their species' unique abilities could fill. Working together, they began bridging those gaps, extending the defensive network to cover every vulnerable point in the galaxy. The work was exhausting and exhilarating at the same time, requiring them to think in dimensions their original forms could never have comprehended. Network completion at 97%, Minjae announced. Entity Scout now 4 hours from core worlds. Will it be enough? Ji-won asked, though he already knew the answer through his connection to the archive's vast intelligence. We're about to find out, Sojin replied. Activating galaxy-wide defense systems now. Throughout the galaxy, hidden installations came online. The consciousness-based defenses created barriers of organized thought that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The network powered by thousands of preserved civilizations reached out to protect worlds that would never know they had been saved. The entity scout hit the defensive network like a wave hitting a seawall. For a moment, the outcome was uncertain. Then the creature that fed on consciousness encountered something it had never faced before. Organized thought that existed beyond its ability to consume. The entity scout was stopped. Confused, for the first time in its existence across multiple galaxies, it had met something it could not devour. Alarms throughout the archive changed from warnings to celebrations as the defensive network held. The entity scout retreated, sending signals back to its masters that this galaxy was protected by something new, something they had never encountered before. "We did it," Yunwu said, his expanded consciousness still connected to every defense station in the galaxy. "The first victory," Minjay corrected. "The main entity forces will arrive soon and they will be prepared for our defenses. But we have bought time to strengthen our network and prepare new strategies." Captain Jiwan and his crew had become part of something larger than themselves. They were no longer just the crew of a single exploration vessel. Admiral Zelthar stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship Eternal Vigilance, watching his fleet die. The holographic display showed another defense line collapsing. Red icons blinked out one by one as Kresh warships tore through his forces like they were made of paper. "Sir, the seventh wing has been destroyed," reported Commander Vishatal, her insectoid features tight with grief. "That's 300 ships gone in the last hour." Zelthar said nothing. What was there to say? For 3 cycles, the Galactic Coalition had fought the Kresh Empire. For 3 cycles, they had lost. World after world had fallen. Fleet after fleet had been scattered into the void. The bodies of billions floated in the darkness between stars. The Coalition had been strong once. The Kelthari brought brilliant strategic minds. The Vormen controlled energy itself. The Tarlaxians were warriors carved from living crystal, nearly impossible to kill. Together they had maintained peace across 200 systems for generations. Then the Kresh came. They arrived from the galactic east with technology that shouldn't exist. Their weapons warped reality. Their shields bent space itself. Their fleets numbered in the thousands. Every battle followed the same pattern. Coalition forces would fight bravely, would use every trick and tactic they knew, and would die anyway. "The Epsilon threshold is lost," another officer reported. "Kresh forces are advancing toward Sanctum Prime." Sanctum Prime, the last fortress world. The final hope. If it fell, the Coalition died with it. 60 billion souls lived on that planet. Refugees from 17 conquered worlds crowded its cities, praying for salvation that would never come. Zelthar looked at his reflection in the dark viewport. He was old by Kelthari standards, his carapace dulled with age and scarred from countless battles. He had fought in 12 major wars before this one. He had never lost before. He had never watched entire civilizations burn. "How long until they reach Sanctum Prime?" he asked quietly. 4 days, sir. Maybe 5 if we commit our remaining reserves. Reserves. They had maybe 200 functional warships left. The Kresh would bring thousands. Simple math. Simple death. A tone sounded across the bridge. The council was calling for an emergency session. Zelthar felt a weight settle on his thorax. He knew what this meeting would be about. Surrender. The word tasted like poison in his mind, but what choice remained? The holographic conference chamber materialized around him. The 12 council members appeared one by one, their alien faces showing the same exhaustion Zelthar felt in his bones. Council Prime Talsindra spoke first. She was Tarlaxian, her crystalline body fractured in 3 places from a battle 2 weeks ago. "We are dying," she said simply. "Our analysis shows complete defeat within 10 days. We must discuss alternatives." "You mean surrender," growled Councillor Morgath, a Vormen warrior whose energy form flickered with barely controlled rage. "You want us to bow to the Kresh, to let them enslave everything we've built?" "I want our people to live." Talsindra's voice cracked. 40 billion dead already. How many more must we sacrifice for pride? The argument began. Zelthar had heard it 100 times. Some counselors wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. Others wanted to fight to the last. A few suggested scattering their populations into deep space, becoming nomads rather than slaves. Then Counselor Rethmara spoke. She was ancient, even by Kelthari standards, and served as keeper of historical records. "There is one option we have not discussed," she said softly. "The Beacon Protocol. Silence fell across the chamber. Every council member knew the protocol. It was ancient, created in the Coalition's earliest days as a final desperate measure. A message transmitted to every corner of the galaxy, begging for help from anyone who might answer. The beacon protocol is meaningless, Morgath said. We know every spacefaring species in the galaxy. The neutral powers won't help us. The minor species lack the strength. There is no one to call. Not every corner, Rethmara said. There are regions we designated as quarantine zones. Regions we do not patrol or monitor. Because they contain primitive species or spatial anomalies, another counselor argued. Nothing there can help us. Rethmara manipulated her console. A star chart appeared, showing a small yellow star far from Coalition space. 200 cycles ago, we observed a species here. They called themselves humans. They were pre-spaceflight but showed remarkable potential. Then spatial anomalies around their system made observation impossible. We labeled it Sol territory and moved on. 200 cycles? Talsindra sounded doubtful. Even if they survived, they would barely have orbital capability by now. How could they possibly help? They couldn't, Rethmara admitted. But the beacon protocol requires we transmit to all regions, including quarantine zones. If we are to die anyway, why not follow procedure completely? More argument. More debate. Finally, they voted. 8-4, the beacon protocol was activated. Zelthar watched as the message was prepared. It was simple, translated into 5,000 languages and mathematical formats. It explained the coalition, the war, the Kresh threat, and the desperate need for help. It provided coordinates. It begged anyone listening to respond. The transmission burst outward at faster-than-light speeds, riding quantum waves across the galaxy. Most signals went to civilizations that had already refused to help. A few went to empty space. One went toward a small yellow star wrapped in 2 centuries of silence. It is done, Rethmara said. May the ancestors forgive us for our false hope. The council dissolved. Zelthar returned to his bridge. 4 days until Sanctum Prime fell. 4 days until everything ended. He did not expect an answer. In his long military career, he had learned that hope was a luxury. Reality was numbers, firepower, and strategy. The numbers said they would lose. The firepower said they would die. The strategy said there was no path to victory. But he had one more task. He ordered his communications officer to monitor all frequencies, especially those directed toward the quarantine zones. It was foolish. It was pointless. But orders were orders, and Zelthar had always followed procedure. 3 days passed. The Kresh advanced. More ships died. Sanctum Prime's orbital defenses prepared for the final battle. Millions of refugees looked to the sky and prayed to gods who did not answer. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, alarms screamed across the bridge. Sir, spatial distortions detected at the system's edge. Zelthar's head snapped up. Kresh reinforcements? Unknown. The signatures don't match any known propulsion system. They're massive. Hundreds of them. The holographic display lit up with contacts. Not red enemy icons, but unknown yellow markers. They appeared from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, emerging from the direction of dead space where nothing should exist. Zelthar's blood ran cold. Another enemy? Here to claim the scraps after the Kresh finished feeding? Then his communications officer gasped. Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's in Galactic Standard. Perfect Galactic Standard. Play it, a voice filled the bridge. It was strange, with odd tonal qualities, but confident and clear. Coalition forces, this is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Space Command. We received your distress call. Hold your positions. Human Armada is entering the war zone. Zelthar stared at the display, at the hundreds of unknown contacts, at the impossible signatures from a dead zone, at salvation arriving from a species that shouldn't even have left their planet yet. Humans, he whispered. The humans answered. The bridge of the Eternal Vigilance erupted into chaos. Officers shouted over each other. Alarms blared. The holographic display updated every second as more contacts appeared from faster-than-light travel. Hundreds became thousands of data points, each representing something unknown. Get me tactical analysis now, Zelthar commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. And someone find out what a human is. Commander Vishatal worked her console frantically. Sir, the historical database has limited information. Humans were observed 200 cycles ago in the Sol system. Pre-spaceflight species, bipedal mammals, Classification: potential future threat due to aggressive tendencies and rapid technological advancement. 200 cycles ago they couldn't leave their planet, another officer said. How are they here now with hundreds of ships? The spatial anomalies. Rethmara's voice came through the communication channel. She had connected from the council chambers. We couldn't observe them for 2 centuries. We don't know what happened in that time. Zelthar studied the display. The unknown contacts were approaching at incredible speed. Their formation was tight, disciplined, military. But whose military? Friend or foe? Magnify the lead vessels, he ordered. The hologram zoomed in. Zelthar's breath caught. The ships were unlike anything in the Coalition database. They were sleek where Kresh ships were brutal. Elegant where Coalition vessels were functional. They had curves that suggested speed and angles that promised violence. Each ship bristled with weapon ports and sensor arrays. Size estimate? Ranging from 300 meters to, ancestors preserve us, 2 kilometers for the largest vessels. Sir, some of these ships are bigger than anything we've ever built. 847 ships total. Tactical reported. All reading active weapons and shields. Energy signatures are off the charts. I've never seen power readings like this. Zelthar forced himself to think clearly. This could be salvation or doom. Open a channel. Let me speak to this Admiral Chen. The communication officer worked quickly. Channel open, sir. Admiral Chen of Earth, this is Fleet Admiral Zelthar of the Galactic Coalition. We received your transmission. Can you confirm your intentions? A pause. Then the voice returned, and this time it carried weight. It was calm, controlled, but underneath was something dangerous. Admiral Zelthar, our intentions are simple. Your beacon protocol reached Earth 3 days ago. We decoded it, analyzed your situation, and mobilized our rapid response fleet. We're here to eliminate the Kresh threat. Eliminate? Zelthar couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. Admiral, the Kresh Empire fields over 3,000 warships. Their technology warps reality itself. We've fought them for 3 cycles and lost every major engagement. We know. We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We watched your war. We studied Kresh tactics. We know exactly what we're facing. You've been watching? Commander Vishital looked disturbed. For how long? Since we achieved faster-than-light capability 70 cycles ago. We had reasons to remain hidden until now. Your distress call changed that calculation. 70 cycles. The humans had been spacefaring for 70 cycles without anyone knowing. Zelthar felt reality shifting beneath him. What else didn't the Coalition know about the galaxy? Across Coalition space, the same conversation was happening. Council members scrambled through archives. Scientists analyzed the sensor data. Everyone asked the same questions. Who were these humans? Where had they come from? Could they be trusted? But on the Kresh command ship Reality's Edge, Grand Marshal Kethrol was laughing. Humans? He studied the intercepted transmission on his display. Never heard of them. Probably some minor species hoping to scavenge glory from our victory. His tactical officer looked less certain. Sir, their fleet composition is unusual. Those energy signatures are meaningless, Kethrol interrupted. Do you know how many times some brave fools arrived to save the Coalition? 7 times. 7 species that thought themselves heroes. All 7 are extinct now. These humans will be number 8. He opened a fleet-wide channel. All Kresh forces, this is Grand Marshal Kethrol. Unknown hostiles are entering the Epsilon threshold. Primary battle fleet will intercept and destroy them. This will take approximately 1 standard hour. Then we proceed to Sanctum Prime as planned. 2,000 Kresh warships adjusted their course. They formed the Dreadclaw formation, a tactic that had broken 50 Coalition defensive lines. Reality warping shields flickered to life around each vessel. Weapons that could crack planets charged up. The Kresh were confident. They had earned that confidence through 3 cycles of unbroken victory. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. Nothing could stop them. Back on the Eternal Vigilance, Zelthar watched the Kresh fleet move to intercept the humans. His tactical display showed the matchup clearly. 2,000 Kresh ships versus 800 human vessels. The math was brutal. Admiral Chen, he said urgently, the Kresh primary fleet is moving to engage you. 2,000 warships with reality warping technology. You need to withdraw. Your 800 ships cannot. 847, Chen corrected gently. And Admiral, with respect, you don't know what our ships can do. We've had 2 centuries to prepare for this. 2 centuries isolated, evolving, advancing. The galaxy forgot about us. That was our advantage, but the numbers matter, Chen agreed. But so does technology. So does training. So does doctrine. The Kresh are strong, Admiral, but they've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. That's going to cost them. Zelthar wanted to argue, but something in Chen's voice stopped him. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't false confidence. It was certainty. Cold, hard certainty. All coalition forces pull back to Sanctum Prime's orbit, Chen continued. Stay out of the engagement zone. This won't take long. How long? Zelthar asked. The Kresh fleet will be eliminated in approximately 60 seconds after they open fire. Maybe 70 if they're lucky. Stay clear and watch. Humanity is announcing its return to the galaxy. Let the whole galaxy see what happens to those who slaughter the innocent. The channel closed. Zelthar stared at the display. 60 seconds. It was insane. It was impossible. Pull all forces back, he ordered quietly, and record everything. If these humans are about to die bravely, the least we can do is remember their sacrifice. But Commander Vishatal was studying her sensor data, her compound eyes wide. Sir, the human ships. They're not acting like any military formation I've ever seen. Their coordination is too perfect. It's like they're all one organism, and their targeting computers just locked onto every single Kresh vessel simultaneously. That's impossible. There are 2,000 targets, I know, sir. But they did it anyway, in under 2 seconds. Zelthar felt something strange stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in 3 cycles of losing. It took him a moment to recognize it. Hope. The two fleets raced toward each other. Kresh vessels radiated confidence, their reality warps making space shimmer around them. Human ships moved like hunting predators, silent and purposeful. Grand Marshal Kethral opened a mocking transmission to the human fleet. Unknown species, you have one chance to flee before we erase you from existence. Surrender now or die. Admiral Chen's response was immediate. You've got one chance to surrender. You have 10 seconds. Kethral's laughter echoed across the communication channels. Kill them all. 2,000 Kresh ships opened fire, and the galaxy learned what humanity had become in 2 centuries of silence. The Kresh opened fire with everything they had. 2,000 warships unleashed weapons that had conquered half the galaxy. Reality-warping missiles streaked through space. Plasma beams thick as starships burned across the void. Graviton bombs that could collapse suns launched in waves. It was enough firepower to destroy planets. Enough to crack moons. Enough to vaporize any fleet the Coalition had ever assembled. The human ships didn't dodge. On the Eternal Vigilance, alarms screamed as sensors registered the incoming destruction. Commander Vishtal made a sound of horror. Other officers looked away, unable to watch another Allied fleet die. Only Admiral Zelthar kept his eyes on the display. He had seen too much death to look away now. If these brave humans were about to be erased, he would witness it. He owed them that much. The Kresh weapons hit the human formation, and nothing happened. The missiles exploded against shields that didn't even flicker. Plasma beams splashed off invisible barriers like water off stone. Graviton bombs detonated harmlessly against defensive fields that seemed to laugh at reality itself. Not one human ship took damage. Not one shield even weakened. Impossible, Vishatal whispered. Those were reality-warping weapons. They ignore conventional defenses. How time elapsed since Kresh opened fire. Zelthar's voice was steady, but his mind was racing. 10 seconds, sir. On the Kresh flagship, Grand Marshal Kethral stared at his display in disbelief. Fire again. Full spread. Every weapon. But Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos, calm and cold. Your turn is over. Now it's ours. The human fleet opened fire. What happened next would be studied by military academies for generations. What happened next would make admirals wake up screaming. What happened next proved that humanity had not been idle during their 2 centuries of isolation. The first weapons to fire were rail cannons, massive electromagnetic accelerators that launched solid metal slugs at relativistic speeds. At 5% of light speed, those slugs hit with the force of nuclear weapons. But these weren't normal rail cannons. Human engineers had perfected them, made them faster, stronger, more accurate. 50 Kresh ships died in the first second as metal rods punched through their reality-warping shields like they weren't there. The shields couldn't bend space fast enough to deflect something moving at relativistic speeds. Basic physics became the Kresh's enemy. Impossible, Kethral said again, but now his voice shook. The second wave of human weapons fired. plasma lances that didn't just burn but seemed to cut through shields at the quantum level. The Kresh had thought their energy defenses were perfect. The humans had found a frequency that made them useless. 100 more Kresh ships became expanding clouds of debris. Time elapsed? Zelthar asked. 15 seconds, sir. The third wave fired. Missiles that didn't follow normal trajectories. They flickered in and out of normal space using micro-jumps to bypass shields entirely. They appeared inside Kresh ships and detonated. 1 missile, 1 ship, 100 deaths. 200 more Kresh vessels disappeared from the tactical display. Kethral screamed orders. Evasive maneuvers. Deploy countermeasures. Reality warp to safety. But the human targeting systems were already compensating. Their artificial intelligence predicted every move before it happened. Their quantum computers calculated every possible escape route and closed them all. Their neural link network connected every ship into one vast tactical mind that thought faster than any biological brain could dream. The fourth wave was different. These were weapons the galaxy had never seen. Quantum disruption missiles that didn't destroy matter but simply made it stop existing on this plane of reality. Where they hit, Kresh ships didn't explode. They just vanished, erased from existence as if they'd never been. 300 more kills. 30 seconds. Sir, Vishtal reported, her voice numb with shock. The human ships moved through the Kresh formation like wolves through sheep. Their point defense systems shot down every Kresh missile. Their shields absorbed every beam. Their maneuverability made coalition ships look like floating rocks. They danced through space, each movement precise, each action calculated, each shot a guaranteed kill. The fifth wave combined everything. Rail cannons, plasma lances, quantum missiles, and something new. Antimatter warheads wrapped in magnetic containment fields. When they detonated, they released pure annihilation. Matter and antimatter met and became pure energy. The Kresh Center formation simply ceased to exist in a blaze of light bright enough to blind. Sensors, 45 seconds, grand. Marshal Kethral tried one last desperate tactic. He ordered all remaining ships to concentrate fire on a single human vessel. If they could kill even one enemy ship, it might show that humans could bleed. 400 Kresh warships targeted the human destroyer Relentless. Every weapon they had left fired at once. The Relentless didn't even slow down. Its shields held perfectly, and while the Kresh wasted their fire on one ship, the rest of the human fleet eliminated 200 more targets. 55 seconds, sir. Withdraw, Kethral screamed. All ships emergency faster than light retreat. But the humans had planned for that too. Around the battlefield, human ships deployed devices that created spatial disruption fields. Faster than light travel became impossible. The Kresh were trapped. Admiral Chen's voice came through, and now it carried an edge of anger. You wanted war, Marshal. You slaughtered billions. You burned worlds. You made the innocent scream. Did you think there would be no reckoning? Did you think you could kill forever without consequence? The final wave of human weapons fired. Every remaining Kresh ship was targeted simultaneously. Rail cannons, plasma lances, quantum missiles, and antimatter warheads all launched together in one perfectly coordinated strike. The battlefield lit up like a newborn star. 60 seconds, Vishtal whispered. The light faded. The sensors cleared. The tactical display updated. 2,000 Kresh ships had entered the battle. 0 remained. Not one had escaped. Not one had survived. The entire Kresh primary battle fleet had been erased from existence in exactly 60 seconds. The human fleet floated in space, untouched. Not one ship damaged. Not one shield depleted. Not one casualty reported. Silence filled the eternal vigilance bridge. Every officer stared at the display, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Trying to understand what it meant, Admiral Zelthar felt something breaking inside him. For 3 cycles, he'd watched his people die. For 3 cycles, he'd believed the Kresh were unstoppable. For 3 cycles, he'd carried the weight of inevitable defeat. And in 60 seconds, a species the galaxy had forgotten had proven everything wrong. Get me Admiral Chen, he said quietly. The channel opened. Yes, Admiral Zelthar. How? The word came out broken. How is this possible? Chen's response was gentle, almost sympathetic. You asked how long we've been watching the galaxy. 70 cycles, I said. But that's not quite true. We've been preparing for much longer. Humanity nearly destroyed itself 200 cycles ago. We fought a civil war that killed billions. It was brutal. It was terrible. And when it ended, the survivors made a choice. What choice? We decided to never be weak again. We decided that if humanity was going to be violent, that violence would only be directed at those who deserved it. We isolated ourselves, built new technology, trained new soldiers, created new weapons. We watched the galaxy and waited for the moment we would be needed. Your beacon gave us that moment. The creche are what happens when evil has no opposition, Chen said. And now his voice was hard as steel. They thought they were apex predators. They were wrong. We've spent 2 centuries becoming something the galaxy has never seen before. We became the thing that hunts predators. Zelthar looked at the debris field that had been 2,000 warships, at the human fleet floating calm and ready. At Salvation that had arrived from Silence, what happens now? He asked. Now? Shen's voice carried grim purpose. Now we end this war. The creche wanted to destroy the innocent. They wanted to conquer the helpless. They made their choice. We're going to show them what happens when humanity decides someone needs to be stopped. The human fleet began moving, not toward Sanctum Prime, toward creche space, toward the empire that had caused so much death. Zelthar watched them go, and for the first time in 3 cycles, he allowed himself to believe in victory. 3 hours after the battle, Admiral Zelthar stood in a transport shuttle approaching the human flagship UESC Indomitable. With him were Commander Vishital and 3 council members, including Rethmara. They had been invited aboard to discuss coordination and strategy. I still can't believe what we witnessed, Counselor Talsindra said, her crystalline form reflecting the shuttle's interior lights. 60 seconds. They destroyed 2,000 ships in 60 seconds. The sensor logs have been verified 17 times, Vishital replied. Every coalition vessel recorded the same data. It happened exactly as we saw it. Rethmara was quiet, studying a datapad filled with historical records. 200 cycles ago, humans were using primitive chemical rockets. They had just sent their first explorers to their own moon. Now they have weapons that make our entire arsenal look like toys. The shuttle docked, the airlock opened, and Admiral Zelthar got his first look at actual humans. They were shorter than Kelthari, taller than Tarlaxians. Bipedal mammals covered in uniforms of dark blue with strange insignias. Their faces were mobile and expressive in ways that reminded Zelthar of primates, but their eyes held intelligence that was anything but primitive. Admiral Chen stepped forward. She was a human female of middle years, her black hair tied back, her posture military perfect. Admiral Zelthar, welcome aboard the Indomitable. I'm glad we could meet in person. They touched appendages in greeting, a human custom called a handshake. Chen's grip was firm but not aggressive. Professional. Thank you for seeing us, Admiral Chen, Zelthar said. And thank you for your intervention. You saved billions of lives today. That's why we came. Chen gestured down a corridor. Please follow me to the briefing room. We have much to discuss. As they walked through the ship, Zelthar observed everything. The corridors were clean and efficient. Crew members moved with purpose and discipline. The technology was everywhere but integrated seamlessly. And the ship felt alive in a way coalition vessels didn't, humming with power barely contained. The briefing room was large, with a holographic display table in the center. Around it stood several other human officers, and one figure that made everyone stop. It was an artificial intelligence. A fully sentient AI with a holographic avatar, something the Coalition had banned centuries ago after the machine wars. Don't worry, Chen said, noticing their reaction. This is Artemis, our tactical AI. We've solved the problems you encountered with artificial intelligence. Artemis and her siblings are partners, not threats. The AI smiled, an eerily human gesture. I assure you I have no desire to exterminate organic life, though I admit I did enjoy calculating the creche fleet's destruction. They were mathematically quite predictable. They sat at the table. Chen activated the hologram, showing a map of Coalition space, creche territory, and human space. Zelthar was shocked to see that human space was vast, encompassing hundreds of systems he thought were empty. We owe you an explanation, Chen began, about where we've been and what we've been doing. She told them the story. 200 cycles ago, humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel. They had been excited, ready to join the galactic community. But before they could announce themselves, they intercepted coalition broadcasts. They learned about galactic politics, wars, and threats. And they learned they were not ready. We were still fighting among ourselves, Chen explained, still divided into hundreds of nations, still carrying old hatreds. If we'd joined the galaxy then, we would have been weak, exploited, possibly enslaved. So we made a different choice. You hid, Talsindra said. We unified, Chen corrected. The spatial anomalies around Sol were natural, but we enhanced them, made our space impossible to observe. Then we spent 2 centuries fixing ourselves. We ended poverty. We ended war between human nations. We built a true global government, the United Earth. And you built weapons, Counselor Morgath observed, his energy form flickering with interest. We built everything. Weapons, yes, but also medicine that can regrow organs, quantum computers that think faster than any biological brain, nanotechnology that can build cities or break down pollutants. We took our aggressive, competitive, innovative nature and focused it entirely on advancement. Chen manipulated the hologram. Images appeared showing human colonies, orbital cities, massive shipyards. We didn't just advance technologically. We transformed ourselves. Neural implants that link our soldiers into tactical networks. Genetic modifications that enhance strength and healing. AI partnerships that make our ships smarter than any crew. We became something new. Rethmara leaned forward. Why? Why such focus on military power? Because we watched the galaxy, Chen said quietly. We saw the Kresh rise. We saw them conquer their first world 30 cycles ago. We saw coalition forces try to stop them and fail. We analyzed every battle, every tactic, every technology. And we knew eventually they would need to be stopped. We decided humanity would be ready to do it. Artemis added, We've been mapping Kresh territory for 50 cycles using stealth drones. We know the location of every military base, every shipyard, every command center. We've analyzed their communication protocols, their tactical patterns, their technological weaknesses. The battle you witnessed wasn't luck. It was the result of decades of preparation and planning. Zelthar felt overwhelmed. You've been watching us for 70 cycles. You could have helped earlier. Billions died in this war. Chen's expression became pained. I know. Believe me, we debated intervention constantly. But we also knew we only get one chance at first contact. If we revealed ourselves too early before we were ready, the Kresh might have adapted. Prepared. The war might have dragged on for decades more. We waited until we could guarantee victory. And our beacon gave you the justification you needed, Vishatal said. Yes, you asked for help. We're not invaders, we're not conquerors, we're responders. The coalition invited us in. That makes everything we do legitimate under galactic law. The hologram changed, showing real-time data from across Kresh space. Zelthar saw chaos. Kresh fleets were retreating from every front. Commanders were screaming conflicting orders. And across their communication networks, one word was repeated again and again. Humans. They're panicking, Morgath said with satisfaction. They should be, Artemis replied. After analyzing the battle footage, they've realized they cannot win. Their technology is inferior, their tactics are predictable, their morale is breaking. The empire that conquered 17 coalition worlds is discovering that they are now the prey. Chen stood and paced around the table. Here's what happens next. We're going to systematically dismantle the Kresh military, not invade their worlds, not harm civilians, just eliminate every warship, every weapon platform, every military installation. We'll do it quickly and precisely. How quickly? Talsindra asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if they hide well. We have 3 more fleets en route. By the time they arrive, the Kresh Empire will no longer have a military capable of threatening anyone. Zelthar processed this. 2 weeks to destroy an empire that had fought the coalition for 3 cycles. And after? What does humanity want from the galaxy? Partnership, Chen said simply. The coalition invited us with your beacon. We'd like to join formally. Equal members, not rulers. We'll contribute our technology, our military, our resources. In exchange, we gain allies and trade partners. We gain a place in the galactic community we should have joined 2 centuries ago. Your military power would make you dominant, Councillor Morgath pointed out. You could rule the coalition if you wanted. We don't want that, Chen said firmly. Humanity learned the hard way that empires built on force crumble eventually. We want genuine cooperation, mutual respect. We'll maintain our own military command, yes. But we'll work with coalition forces, not replace them. Rethmara spoke up. What about the Kresh themselves? After you dismantle their military, what happens to their people? They'll be placed under supervised reconstruction. Think of it like parole for an entire civilization. They'll disarm completely, pay reparations to the coalition, implement reforms to prevent future aggression. But we won't exterminate them. We won't enslave them. Humanity believes in justice, not revenge. Even after they killed billions? Talsindra's voice was bitter. Even then, Chen confirmed, because becoming monsters to fight monsters leaves the galaxy with more monsters. We'll hold the Kresh leadership accountable. War crimes trials, imprisonment. But their children don't deserve punishment for their parents' sins. The meeting continued for hours. They discussed logistics, communication protocols, integration strategies. The humans were professional, prepared, and genuinely interested in working with the coalition rather than dominating it. Finally, as the coalition representatives prepared to leave, Zelthar spoke privately with Chen. Your people spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment, he said, transforming yourselves into something the galaxy has never seen. Why? What drives humans to such extremes? 3 weeks after the human armada entered the war zone, Admiral Zelthar stood on Sanctum Prime watching broadcasts from across the galaxy. Every news network, every communication channel, every public forum was talking about the same thing. The war was over. The Kresh Empire had surrendered. It hadn't taken 2 weeks as Admiral Chen predicted. It had taken 17 days. 17 days of precision strikes that surgically removed every Kresh military asset from existence. Shipyards destroyed. Orbital platforms disabled. Weapon stockpiles eliminated. And through it all, not one civilian casualty. The humans had proven they could destroy with perfect accuracy while showing restraint that seemed impossible. The formal surrender will be broadcast in 5 minutes, Commander Vishtal reported. She looked different now, healthier. The weight of impending death had been lifted from everyone's shoulders, and it showed. Zelthar activated the holographic display. It showed the throne room of the Kresh Emperor, the being who had ordered the deaths of billions, who had commanded fleets to burn worlds, who had believed himself unstoppable. He looked small now, broken. Human Marines stood around the room in their dark blue armor. They had extracted the Emperor from his fortress in 17 minutes, passing through defenses that were supposed to be impenetrable. The Kresh had learned that human special forces were even more terrifying than human fleets. Admiral Chen entered the throne room, her uniform crisp, her bearing military perfect. Behind her came coalition representatives, including several council members. Emperor Vecthral, Chen said formally, you are charged with war crimes, genocide, and crimes against sapient life. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The death toll is documented. The suffering is recorded. How do you plead? The Emperor said nothing. His 4 eyes stared at the floor. Your silence is noted, Chen continued. By authority of the Galactic Coalition and the United Earth Space Command, I accept the Kresh Empire's unconditional surrender. The terms are as follows. She read them aloud. The Kresh military would be completely dismantled. All warships destroyed or repurposed. All weapon platforms demolished. The Empire would pay reparations to every world they conquered. Their leadership would stand trial. Their territory would be placed under coalition supervision for no less than 50 cycles. Your people will be given a chance to rebuild, Chen said. A chance to prove they can exist peacefully in the galaxy. But that chance comes with absolute conditions. Break them and humanity will return. And next time we won't be gentle. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice a broken rasp. Why not just exterminate us? You have the power. We would have done it to you. I know you would have, Chen replied. That's the difference between us. You saw other species as obstacles to remove. We see them as potential partners, even you. Even after everything you've done. Humanity believes in justice, Emperor, not revenge. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, billions watched and processed what it meant. The Kresh, unstoppable for 3 cycles, had been defeated in less than a month. And the species that did it was now offering them mercy. Over the next weeks, Admiral Zelthar watched humanity integrate into galactic society. They were unlike anything the Coalition had known. They shared technology freely, teaching Coalition engineers about quantum computing and neural networks. They offered medical advances that would save millions. They opened trade relations and cultural exchanges, but they also maintained their military readiness. Human fleets patrolled former Kresh territory. Human bases were established in strategic locations. They were friendly, helpful, and generous. But everyone knew the same truth. Humanity was now the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and they weren't hiding it. A month after the surrender, the Coalition Council held a formal ceremony. Sanctum Prime's Great Assembly Hall was filled with representatives from every Coalition species. Media from hundreds of worlds broadcast the event. Council Prime Talsindra stepped to the podium, her crystalline form repaired and gleaming. 53 days ago we were dying. The Kresh Empire was at our gates. Our fleets were shattered. Our worlds were burning. We sent out a desperate call for help, not expecting an answer. She gestured to where Admiral Chen stood with other human representatives. But the universe surprised us. A species we thought primitive, a people we had forgotten, answered our call. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't demand concessions. They simply came when we needed them most. Today, we formally welcome humanity into the Galactic Coalition as equal members. We offer them not just gratitude but partnership. We recognize that the galaxy is better with humanity in it. Stronger, safer, more hopeful. Applause filled the hall. Admiral Chen stepped forward to accept the formal membership documents. But before she could speak, Talsindra held up a hand. There is one more matter, the Council Prime said. Admiral Zelthar, please step forward. Zelthar was confused, but he obeyed. He stood next to Chen at the podium, unsure what was happening. Admiral Zelthar served the Coalition for 70 cycles, Talsindra said. He fought in 13 major wars. He commanded fleets in battles no one else wanted to lead. And during our darkest hour, when hope seemed lost, he continued to fight. Not because he believed we could win, but because someone had to stand between the innocent and the darkness. She turned to face him directly. The Coalition wishes to offer you a position. We are creating a new joint command structure. Coalition forces and human forces working together. We need someone to lead it, someone both sides respect, someone who understands sacrifice. Admiral Zelthar, will you accept the position of Supreme Commander of Coalition Defense Forces? Zelthar was stunned. Before he could respond, Admiral Chen spoke up. I support this nomination, she said. Admiral Zelthar proved his character in the worst circumstances possible. Humanity would be honored to serve alongside him. The hall erupted in applause again. Zelthar felt emotions he couldn't name. For 3 cycles he had carried the weight of failure, of watching his people die, of being unable to stop the slaughter. And now they were offering him trust, responsibility, hope. I accept, he said quietly. Then louder, I accept. Later, in a private moment, Zelthar and Chen stood on an observation deck looking out at Sanctum Prime. The planet was healing. Refugees were returning home. Cities were rebuilding. Life was resuming. Can I ask you something honestly? Zelthar said. Of course. Your fleet could have arrived sooner. You were watching the war. You knew we were dying. Why wait until the last moment? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Because if we arrived too early, the Kresh would have retreated. Regrouped, adapted, the war would have continued. But by waiting until the Kresh committed everything, until they thought victory was certain, we could eliminate their entire military capability in one coordinated strike. It was a calculated risk. Billions died while you calculated. I know. Chen's voice carried genuine pain. It's a decision that will haunt me forever. We could have saved more lives by acting sooner. But we might have caused more deaths in a longer war. Command means making terrible choices, Admiral. You know that better than most. Zelthar did know. He had made his own terrible choices during the war. What happens now? You've defeated the Kresh, joined the Coalition, become the galaxy's dominant power. What does humanity want long-term? Peace, Chen said simply. A chance to explore, to learn, to grow alongside other species. We spent 2 centuries isolated, growing strong. Now we want to be part of something larger, to contribute, to matter. And if another threat emerges, another empire like the Kresh? Chen's expression hardened. Then humanity will do what we've always done. We'll adapt. We'll prepare. We'll fight, because that's what we are, Admiral. We're survivors. We're innovators. And when the innocent need protection, we're guardians. She gestured to the human fleet visible in orbit, sleek warships floating in perfect formation. We built these ships not because we love war, but because we hate what happens when evil has no opposition. The galaxy forgot about us for 2 centuries. That won't happen again. Humanity is here now, and we're here to stay. Zelthar watched a coalition cruiser pass near a human destroyer. The 2 ships moved in coordination, already practicing joint maneuvers. 2 species that barely knew each other a month ago, now learning to work as one. The galaxy has changed, he said. Yes, Chen agreed, and it will keep changing. New species will emerge, new technologies will develop. New challenges will appear, but now the galaxy has something it didn't have before. What's that? Hope backed by strength, mercy backed by power, peace backed by the absolute certainty that those who threaten it will face consequences. Chen turned to face him. The Kresh made a mistake, Admiral. They thought strength meant they could do whatever they wanted. They learned differently. Humanity will teach the galaxy a new lesson. Real strength is knowing when to fight and when to show compassion. Being able to destroy everything but choosing to build instead. In the weeks that followed, that lesson spread across the galaxy. Human technology improved coalition medicine and infrastructure. Human trade opened new economic opportunities. Human military presence made space safer than it had been in generations.